Now I want to bring in three men who have the ear of Americans: radio host John Fredericks, Joe Madison, and Dennis Prager. And we know it's going to be a great conversation when we have all three of you. Thank you for joining me. Good evening. Dennis, you first. What do you make of Donald Trump staying on as executive producer of Celebrity Apprentice?
This is the worst possible answer you could receive, Don. Nothing.
Okay.
I make nothing of it. It is a non-issue. You even had folks on your show just the last hour who said the same thing. Yeah. There were so many big issues for the media to take into consideration. I don't think this is one of them. It is truly in the royalty realm.
Yeah, I don't really hate what you said. It means nothing to me either, but we have 24 hours here and we certainly can discuss the president-elect and whether he's staying on.
That's honest.
As a matter of fact, I mean, it would be great if I could get some of those royalties, but I can't. But as a matter of fact, I think it's important too what David Gergen says. David Gergen says it may be okay for him to do that, but it's also about appearances and how it looks for a president of the United States to be associated with The Apprentice. Joe Madison, what do you make of that?
Well, if it's just royalties, in other words, he's just going to get a check because he puts his name on the scroll as executive producer, then you guys are right. It's nothing. But let me quickly say, you know, sometimes when you compare it to a book, when you write a book, the book is written, it's done. And so you don't add to it, you write it. But when you start talking about a reality show, things can happen in those shows. Things can be said in those shows. And now the President of the United States' name will be on that show. Mm-hmm. And that's what David Gergen was saying, that it could create a problem down the road. I mean, let's say it's a major political, social, controversial issue.
I should tell you, though, Joe, before you go on, the series was shot a long time ago, and he has no involvement.
But we don't know what will come up. That's my point. And we don't know how the American people will react to certain episodes. Mm-hmm. And will the president want his name on it? Yeah.
And we should say, as I said in the previous show, Ronald Reagan got royalties and residuals from movies and productions. Our current president, President Barack Obama, also got royalties from his book as well. So, you know, I guess many, and probably for good reason, don't see what the whole controversy is here. But John, I'm curious to hear what your listeners are saying about Donald Trump taking on the carrier union boss, Chuck Jones, via Twitter. Tell me about that.
Well, Don, first of all, thanks for having me on the December 8th, the one-month anniversary of Donald Trump's historic victory for America. The victory, by the way, that I predicted on your show 20 consecutive times, and I also told you every state that he was going to win, so I appreciate coming back. Look, as
that was
far
a nice
as
pat
the
on the back.
Carrier, thank you.
Go on.
Thanks for having me.
Go on.
The carrier situation. The union leaders, much like the leaders in the Democratic Party, are totally out of touch with their constituents and their members, talking about what deal was made or corporate welfare or some jobs might not go here or there. Here's the bottom line. Tell that to the 1,000 families whose jobs got saved before Christmas from Carrier. Tell that to them. They don't care. A lot of this has to do with the elite establishment, both in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Those so-called Heritage Foundation, pure conservatives that conceive everything in some kind of a philosophical petri dish, excuse me. The whole thing
John,
is ridiculous.
Not to be disrespectful.
He saved 1,000 jobs.
Not to be disrespectful, but my question was, what are your listeners saying about that?
My listeners are saying they saved 1,000 jobs in Carrier. They hope that Donald Trump's policy saves jobs for them. Yeah. I mean,
well, the whole point of him saying that is exactly what you were saying now, is that it was less than 1,000 jobs. He wanted to correct the president-elect on that, and then it turned into this big thing about, you know, the president-elect tweeting and going after him on Twitter. So when it wasn't 1,000 jobs, it was less than that. So.
Well, it might be less than that right now, but it could be over that when everything is said and done, when President-elect's policies go into place. But the union leader there was out of touch with his members. They voted for Trump. He has no idea what's going on. Trump's policies are going to save thousands and thousands of jobs for Americans all over America whose jobs have been shipped overseas, who have been sold out by the elites in both
And
parties. So
that is the hope.
This is all to do by nothing.
That is the hope. But Dennis, I want to ask you, this man is now receiving death threats as a result of Trump's tweets. Should he be more careful with what he puts out on Twitter?
Anybody, first of all, I believe anybody who sends a death threat needs to be followed up by the FBI. I and everyone in public life receives death threats. It's a very sad fact of American life. I don't blame the president any more than I blame President Obama.
You're not the president, though.
Excuse me, you're right, the president-elect.
No, I said you're not the president. I don't really care about that.
Oh, you're right. Okay. No, I understand that. But death threats are death threats. President Obama keeps mentioning periodically Ferguson, the police officer involved in Ferguson who was acquitted by a jury that included not only African Americans but black nationalists, acquitted the man of all charges, and that man gets death threats, so much so that he's basically in hiding and perhaps for the rest of his life. It's not fair, and this has to stop. But I don't blame the president for saying something critical about a union head.
I don't remember the president tweeting out something negatively about the police officer in
Well,
Ferguson.
saying Ferguson, you don't need a tweet. You have the bully pulpit.
Come on now. Ferguson is so far. Look. Let's be quite candid about this. If this president-elect is going to be so thin-skinned that he is going to tweet every time somebody says something negative about him, he's going to be the tweet king of the universe. The reality is he only tweets when it's about him. Darn it, how come he didn't tweet about those Nazis that showed up at Texas A&M? He didn't tweet about that. But whenever it's about Donald Trump, whenever it's about him, then he is quickly on that. First of all, to be quite candid, he ought to put that darn phone down and start picking up the briefing papers that the intelligence community keeps telling him that he needs to read and do some deep diving in what's going on. The second thing I want to say is that why don't you ask me what my callers think about what a union member said? Matter of fact, his members have called my show, and they are behind him 100%. Because they are absolutely ticked off that they were not told the truth. There were 800 families that saved their jobs, but there are about 300 or 400, and some of them are white-collar people that have lost their jobs, and now you've got some people are happy and some people are sad, and the reality is that they're upset because they were told it was 1,100 jobs, and it turned out to be maybe 700 when we finish, if not fewer. And carrier CEOs told them, the head folks told them that they could have reduced their salaries to $5 an hour and Carrier was still going to move to Mexico.
Well, I did not have to ask you because I knew you would just say it like you just did.
Sorry. If that analysis is correct, in 2 years, the American public has something called elections to undo this election.
And
so
that's
we'll
why
see
I'm
whether
going
that
to be
analysis
fighting
is
my
accurate.
butt off for these next 2 years. You're absolutely 100% correct.
We're out of time. We can see why you guys are on the radio because you certainly know how to talk. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.